Hi there and welcome to the channel, and in this video I'll be talking about Robert Louis Stevenson's 1879 book Travels with a Donkey in the Cévennes, his account of a 12-day 120-mile walking tour undertaken the previous autumn through this mountainous region of south-central France. Now the book is divided into 5 parts, over the course of which we move from discord to harmony. So the first 2 parts are full of frustrations, and these derive from numerous sources, including the problems posed by the hostile terrain, errors of navigation caused by unreliable local informants, typically drawn from the ranks of the French peasantry, and, above all, by the difficulties engendered by Stevenson's ancient donkey, Modestine, who walks at an infuriatingly slow pace, halts when whipped, and only breaks into a trot when going in the wrong direction. As you may have gathered, Modestine is quite a character, and Stevenson's rendering of these interactions between man and beast are most amusing, and I'll just provide you with a sample of them. A little out of the village, Modestine, filled with the demon, set her heart upon a by-road and positively refused to leave it. I dropped all my bundles and, I'm ashamed to say, struck the poor sinner twice across the face. It was pitiful to see her lift up her head with shut eyes, as if waiting for another blow. I came very near crying, but I did a wiser thing than that, and sat squarely down by the roadside to consider my situation under the cheerful influence of tobacco and a nip of brandy. Modestine, in the meanwhile, munched some black bread with a contrite, hypocritical air. It was plain that I must make a sacrifice to the gods of shipwreck. I threw away the empty bottle destined to carry milk. I threw away my own white bread, and, disdaining to act by general average, kept the black bread for Modestine. Lastly, I threw away the cold leg of mutton and the egg whisk, although this last was dear to my heart. Thus I found room for everything in the basket, and even stowed the boating coat on the top. By means of an end of cord, I slung it under one arm, and although the cord cut my shoulder, and the jacket hung almost to the ground, it was with a heart greatly lightened that I set forth again. In part 3, Stevenson reaches a Catholic monastery, Our Lady of the Snows, which is still in operation, only now it's home to nuns rather than the monks of Stevenson's day, and here Modestine is led away for a well-earned break, and, unsurprisingly, in her absence, harmony breaks out. Stevenson introduces us to the cast of characters in the monastery, firstly the priests, and then the boarders, and what impresses him the most is how men from such diverse backgrounds have been able to come together in a spirit of mutual tolerance and are able to engage in friendly disputation upon all matters theological and political, and he leaves the monastery with his faith in humanity greatly restored. In part 4, we reach a peak of harmony between man and nature in a beautiful short chapter entitled A Night Among the Pines, which contains perhaps the most quotable passages of the book, and so I'll just read you a brief excerpt. Night is a dead monotonous period under a roof, but in the open world it passes lightly, with its stars and dews and perfumes, and the hours are marked by changes in the face of nature. What seems a kind of temporal death to people choked between walls and curtains is only a light and living slumber to the man who sleeps afield. All night long he can hear nature breathing deeply and freely. Even as she takes her rest, she turns and smiles, and there is one stirring hour unknown to those who dwell in houses, when a wakeful influence goes abroad over the sleeping hemisphere, and all the outdoor world are on their feet. It is then that the cock first crows, not this time to announce the dawn, but like a cheerful watchman, speeding the course of night. Cattle awake on the meadows, sheep break their fast on dewy hillsides, and change to a new lair among the ferns, and houseless men, who have lain down with the fowls, open their dim eyes and behold the beauty of the night. Part 5 is something of a curiosity, because we're suddenly confronted with a mass of historical material concerning the Camisards, a group of Protestant resistance fighters who waged a guerrilla campaign against the Catholic authorities at the beginning of the 18th century. Stevenson is rather besotted with their doings, and he compares them to the Scottish Covenanters of the 18th century. This last section could be taken or left, I suppose. It's basically only of scholarly interest. And we conclude with Stevenson parting tearfully from Modestine. Now, besides recommending this book as a wonderful piece of travel writing, there are 3 further features of Travels with a Donkey in the Cévennes, which I wish to touch upon briefly because each of them greatly added to my enjoyment. The first of them is Stevenson's vocabulary. There really are some very obscure words in this book, and as a connoisseur of such language, I greatly enjoyed them. Allow me to quote a few. So when I read, I always make a note of any new words at the front of the book. So what do we have here? A spencer, which is a short jacket. Vaticination, which is prophecy. And I'm sure that Stevenson took this word from Scott, who uses it quite frequently. Hypothec, which is a concern or affair in the context Stevenson employs it, but also means in Flemish. This comes from one of the informants on the server of a disappointed man, mortgage. Glebe, which is an archaism for land or fields. Shako, a conical military hat. Phalanstery, which is a group of people living together and holding property in common. And lastly, grig, grasshopper or cricket, or a small eel. So there you are. I will list those in the description in case you want to chase them up for yourselves. Secondly, there are numerous references to the poetry that Stevenson enjoys, so it's great for getting an insight into some of his influences. So he quotes from Milton, Pope, Horace, and from Keats. And finally, there were the references to the fabled Beast of Gévaudan, which terrorized the French countryside between 1764 and 1767. These mentions prompted me to look up some artists' impressions of this monster, which, as I'm sure you'll agree, are rather charming. So there you have it. I've said all I wish to say about Stevenson's book, and now all that remains is to bid you farewell in the time-honoured fashion. So until the next time, be safe, be strong, nanu nanu.